The solar array panels stretched out before us, catching the distant sunlight that looked like little more than a bright star from this far out. Nick floated about 20 meters to my left, his spacesuit a bright splash of corporate blue against the black void. We'd been outside for nearly 3 hours already, checking connection points and replacing worn insulation on the cables, routine maintenance that kept our little outpost alive here at the edge of the solar system. Almost done with Section 4, I said into my helmet mic, making a note on my wrist display. How's it going on your end? Nick didn't answer immediately. In our 8 months stationed at mining outpost KP-27, I'd gotten used to his occasional distraction during EVAs. He loved being in space more than anyone I'd ever met, sometimes stopping work just to take in the view. Nick, I prompted again. Mike, he finally responded, his voice oddly flat. Look over there. I pushed off gently from the panel I'd been inspecting, turning in the microgravity to face Nick's direction. His arm was pointing toward the darkness beyond our asteroid. What am I looking at? I asked, scanning the star field. That. Nick's voice had a strange quality to it now. That green thing. I squinted and adjusted my helmet visor to cut down the glare. At first I couldn't see anything except some far-off stars and a cloudy nebula. Then I spotted it, a faint green streak in the darkness, barely visible but definitely there. Probably just a comet, I said, already turning back to the solar array. Or some space junk reflecting sunlight weird. We've got 2 more sections to finish before... It's moving, Nick cut in. I looked again. The green speck looked different than before. Bigger, maybe, with a pulse to it that didn't match anything normal I'd seen in all my time working in space. Weird optical effect, I suggested, trying to sound more certain than I felt. Cosmic ray hitting your visor, maybe. Let's wrap this up. The communication line buzzed with static. Then Dr. Klein's voice came through, uncharacteristically urgent. Harris, Brennan, return to the base immediately. The use of our last names got my attention. Klein was always formal, but this had a sharpness I hadn't heard before. We're not quite finished with the maintenance cycle, I replied. About 40 minutes left on the... Now, Harris. Klein's voice allowed no argument. Something's appeared on our long-range sensors. We need everyone inside until we can identify it. I looked at the green light again. It had definitely grown larger, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. A chill ran up my spine. The temperature controls in my suit weren't helping. Copy that. We're packing up. I turned to Nick, expecting to see him already gathering his tools. Instead, he remained motionless, still staring at the light. Nick, you heard Klein. Time to go in. The only response was the sound of his breathing, now coming in quick, shallow bursts through the comm link. Nick? I pushed off toward him, covering the distance between us with practiced ease in the low gravity. Hey, snap out of it. We need to go. When I got to him and turned him by the shoulder, what I saw on his face through his helmet visor shocked me. His eyes were wide open, his pupils huge, and he was staring at the green light without blinking. It's calling me, he whispered. What? I tightened my grip on his arm. Nothing's calling you, it's just some weird space phenomenon. Klein wants us inside. Nick shook his head slowly. You don't hear it? The green light blinked again, getting brighter. Now it wasn't just a spot, but it spread into something like a misty cloud, with streaks that went across the darkness. There's nothing to hear, Nick. Space doesn't work that way. I tugged at him, trying to guide him back toward the airlock. Let's go. We need to secure these tools and get inside. For a moment, he seemed to regain focus, nodding and beginning to collect his equipment. I turned away to gather my own tools, relieved that whatever strange moment had passed. The snap of a release catch made me spin back around. Nick had detached his safety tether. What are you doing? I lunged toward him, my movements clumsy with sudden panic. Nick, reattach right now. His face went blank again, with that same faraway look. Without another word, he pushed off hard from the array structure, shooting backward into open space. "Nick!" I scrambled to grab him, my gloved fingers brushing against his boot but failing to find purchase. "Klein! Emergency! Nick's detached and heading off structure!" I launched myself after him, but he'd given himself a much stronger push. The gap between us widened as Nick floated rapidly away from the asteroid, directly toward the pulsing green light. "Nick, fire your maneuvering pack!" I shouted into the comm. "Use your emergency return protocol!" He didn't turn on his thrusters. The space between us got bigger, and my tether reached its limit with a sharp tug that stopped me from following him. "I'm going after him," I said, reaching for my own tether release. "Negative, Harris." Commander McLean's voice cut through the channel now. "Do not detach. We're sending Charlie out with the retrieval kit." I floated without control at the limit of my safety line as Nick moved further away from me. The green light got brighter, shining on Nick's spacesuit. "Nick, please," I tried again, my voice breaking. "Use your thrusters. Come back." For one brief moment, I thought I saw him turn his head back toward the base, toward me. Then the green light flared with sudden, blinding intensity. When my vision cleared seconds later, the light had moved to a distant point again, and Nick was gone, not drifting away, not moving farther into space, simply gone, as if he'd never been there at all. I hung suspended in shock, staring at the empty space where my friend had been moments before. Behind me, I heard the hiss of the airlock cycling. Charlie emerged in their EVA suit, propelling quickly to my position with the rescue gear. They pulled up short beside me, looking around the darkness. "Where is he?" Charlie asked, their normally steady voice tight with concern. I could only point toward the far-off green dot of light, now back to its normal size. He was there. And then the light got brighter, and I couldn't finish the sentence. Charlie stayed beside me for several long minutes, both of us looking through the blackness for any sign of Nick. Their hand touched my shoulder through the spacesuit. It helped, even if I could barely feel it. "We have to go back in," Charlie finally said. "Commander's orders." I nodded numbly as Charlie guided me back to the base. Every few seconds, I looked over my shoulder, hoping to see Nick's suit lights or hear something from his comms. There was nothing but stars and that distant green light, now just a faint smudge against the emptiness. We got to the airlock, cycled through silently, and took off our helmets. Charlie's face showed the same shock and confusion I felt. Their eyes kept moving to the viewport as if Nick might suddenly show up. "What happened out there, Mike?" they asked quietly. I shook my head, unable to explain what I'd just seen. How do you describe watching a friend disappear into nothing, pulled toward a light that shouldn't be there? As we took off our spacesuits and got ready for all the questions waiting inside, I kept thinking the same thing. Nick didn't just drift away or get lost in space. Something took him. The emergency debrief started the moment Charlie and I walked through the inner airlock door. Commander McLean stood waiting for us, his face with hard lines and deep creases around his eyes. "What happened out there?" he asked, his calm tone betrayed by the tension in his shoulders. Charlie glanced at me, then took over. Nick was working on the solar array with Mike when he started acting weird. He broke protocol, released his tether, and pushed off into space. Then he just disappeared. Disappeared? McLean's eyebrows pulled together. "People don't disappear in space. They drift away." I found my voice. "He didn't drift away, sir. He was there 1 second. Then this green light got really bright, and when it dimmed, Nick was gone. Not moving away from us. Completely gone." McLean looked at my face, checking if I might be confused or lying. When he saw I wasn't, he turned toward the corridor that led to the command center. "Follow me, both of you." We walked in silence through the narrow passage that connected the airlocks to the main hub of our asteroid base. The lighting seemed too harsh after hours in the filtered sunlight of our helmets. Each step felt heavy as the reality of what had happened sank in. Dr. Klein was waiting in the command center, pacing back and forth in front of the main console. The floor screens showed our asteroid's position and the surrounding space. He stopped when we entered and looked right at me. "Tell me exactly what you saw," he demanded without preamble. I went through it again, step by step, from Nick pointing out the strange green light to his final moments. As I spoke, Klein's expression changed from skepticism to something that seemed like confirmation. "And you're certain he said it was calling him?" Klein asked when I finished. "Those were his exact words," I said, "right before he detached his tether." Charlie nodded. "When I got out there, Mike was alone at the end of his tether, and Nick was just gone." McLean turned to Klein, who had resumed his pacing. "You know something, Klein. Time to share it with the rest of us." Klein stopped, his fingers working restlessly against each other. "The signals and the light are connected," he admitted. "We intercepted unusual radio transmissions 3 days ago." 3 days? McLean's voice rose sharply. "And you didn't think to mention this?" "I wanted to verify my findings before causing unnecessary alarm," Klein replied, walking to his workstation and bringing up a complex waveform on the main screen. "These aren't normal radio waves. They don't match any known pattern used in human communications or naturally occurring stellar phenomena." I stepped closer to the screen. "What are they then?" "I believe the light is emitting an unknown form of radiation that potentially affects our minds," Klein said, his words measured as if he was still working through the theory himself. "The signals contain patterns that seem almost designed to interface with neural pathways." "You're saying it's messing with our heads?" Charlie asked, their usually steady voice cracking slightly. "That's my current hypothesis, yes." Klein adjusted the display to show a comparison between the signals and human brainwave patterns. "Look at these similarities. It could explain Nick's behavior, why he thought something was calling him." McLean sat in the command chair, looking serious. "So what are we dealing with, Doctor? Some kind of weapon? A trap?" "I don't know," Klein admitted. "But whatever it is, it seems to have the ability to influence human perception and possibly cognition itself." The room went quiet as we all processed what this meant. Nick hadn't just gone crazy or made a mistake. Something had gotten into his mind and pulled him away from us. "What are our options?" McLean finally asked. Klein hesitated. "We could call for immediate evacuation. The supply ship isn't due for another 3 weeks, but we have the emergency shuttle." "And what about Nick?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "We're not just going to leave him out there, are we?" McLean looked at me with something like sympathy. "Harris, we don't even know if Nick is still—" "He's alive," I cut in, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. "Whatever that thing is, it took him somewhere. It didn't kill him." McLean rubbed his hand across his face, looking unsure of himself for the first time. After a while, he made up his mind. "We'll wait 24 hours before calling for evacuation. Monitor that light, continue analyzing the signals, and run continuous scans for Nick's suit beacon. If there's any chance he's out there and alive, we need to know." Klein nodded, already turning back to his workstation. "Something is out there watching us," I said, the words coming out before I'd fully formed the thought. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. Whatever it is, it's not just some random space phenomenon. It chose Nick. It wanted him. Charlie put a hand on my shoulder. "Mike, you're exhausted. We all are. Maybe you should try to get some rest." McLean nodded. "That's an order, Harris. 6 hours minimum. Charlie and Klein can handle monitoring for now, and I'll relieve them after. We all need to stay sharp if we're going to figure this out." I wanted to argue, but found I couldn't. The adrenaline that had kept me going was draining away, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion in its place. I nodded and headed to my quarters, My small room looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. Bed unmade, a half-empty coffee mug on the desk, Nick's borrowed chess set still set up mid-game from our match 2 nights ago. The normalcy of it felt wrong somehow, as if everything should have changed to reflect what had happened outside. I dropped onto my bed without bothering to undress, too tired to care about comfort. I was exhausted but couldn't fall asleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nick drifting away, reaching toward that eerie green light. When sleep finally claimed me, it pulled me under completely. In my dream, Nick floated in empty space, his back to me. I called his name, but he didn't turn. As I got closer, I saw the green light surrounding him, not just illuminating him, but seeping through his suit, under his skin. When he finally turned toward me, his face wasn't his anymore. His features had melted away, leaving only a smooth, blank surface that reflected the green glow. The light around him began to expand, changing shape until it formed a massive mouth, large enough to swallow worlds. Inside were countless eyes blinking in unison, and rows upon rows of crystalline teeth that pulsed with the same green energy. Nick's body dissolved into the mouth as it opened wider, reaching toward me. A voice that wasn't a voice filled my head. "You're next." I woke up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. The dream clung to me like a physical presence, too vivid and coherent to be dismissed as normal nightmare imagery. It felt like a message, a warning. Looking at my clock, I saw I'd been asleep for just over 5 hours, close enough to McLean's ordered minimum. I swung my legs off the bed and sat there for a moment, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the dream. Something pulled me to my desk terminal. I accessed the exterior camera feeds, cycling through the different views until I found what I was looking for. A view of the star field in the direction where Nick had disappeared. The green light was still there. Only now, it didn't look like a distant speck anymore. It had grown larger, its edges more defined, pulsing with what seemed like deliberate rhythm. It was closer, much closer than before. And as I stared at it on my screen, I could have sworn it pulsed once in perfect sync with my heartbeat, as if it knew I was watching. The small beeping sound from my communication panel snapped me out of my daze while I was looking at sensor readings. I'd spent all day yesterday checking any info I could find about the strange green light, trying to find some trace of Nick. I tapped the flashing alert on my screen. It was the automated morning check-in reminder. Charlie hadn't logged their status, weird for someone who always followed routine and procedure. "Charlie?" I called into the comm. No response. I checked the life signs monitoring system. All crew had bio-trackers in our ID badges. Standard procedure for asteroid mining operations where losing someone in the complex tunnels was a real concern. Charlie's signal showed active vital signs, but the location ping put them outside the base perimeter near the eastern sector. That made no sense. No scheduled maintenance was due today, and after what happened to Nick, McLean had strictly ordered everyone to stay inside unless absolutely necessary. I tried the comm again. "Charlie, do you copy? Your morning check-in is overdue." The only response was static. My stomach knotted as I checked the external camera feeds, cycling through views until I found the eastern sector. The picture wasn't great at that distance, but I could make out what looked like Charlie's maintenance vehicle parked near the airlock. No sign of Charlie themselves. I grabbed my tablet and went to the command center, walking faster with each step. Commander McLean was already there, going over system reports with Dr. Klein. "Sir, we have a situation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Charlie missed morning check-in. Their tracker shows them outside the base near the eastern perimeter." McLean's head snapped up. "Outside? I gave explicit orders." "I know, sir. They're not responding to comms, but their life signs are stable. Their maintenance vehicle is parked by the eastern airlock." McLean's jaw tightened as he exchanged a glance with Klein. "How long since their last movement?" I checked the data. Tracker shows minimal movement for the past 40 minutes. Before that, there's a straight path from the airlock to their current position. We need to bring them in, McLean said, already moving toward the equipment locker. Harris, suit up. You're with me. Klein stepped forward. Commander, after what happened to Brennan, is it wise to... We're not losing another crew member, Doctor. McLean cut him off. We go out, we get Charlie, we come straight back. You'll monitor from here and keep the comms open. Klein looked like he wanted to object further, but nodded instead. I'll watch your telemetry and track that phenomenon. Its energy signature has been fluctuating all morning. 10 minutes later, McLean and I were in our EVA suits and going through the eastern airlock. As soon as we stepped onto the asteroid's surface, I felt exposed. The black emptiness of space was all around us, and the green light was somewhere out there in the darkness. Stay focused, Harris, McLean said, noting my hesitation. Keep your eyes on me or the ground. Don't look for that light unless I tell you to. We went to Charlie's vehicle, a small utility rover used for moving stuff to the farther parts of our mining operation. It was turned off, but not damaged. Check the logs, McLean ordered while scanning the surrounding area. I pulled up the vehicle's system through my suit's interface. Last operated 3 hours ago. Charlie drove it from the main bay to here, then the engine was powered down manually. McLean pointed to the ground beside the vehicle. Look, footprints. The asteroid's dusty surface showed clear boot prints leading away from the rover. Single file, evenly spaced. Not the marks of someone running or being dragged. Charlie had walked away deliberately. We followed the trail, our own boots adding new prints alongside Charlie's. The footprints led straight toward the area markers, with reflective posts every 20 meters. There, McLean said, pointing ahead. About 50 meters past the last boundary marker was Charlie, completely still. They had their back to us, looking out into empty space. Even from here, I could see they weren't attached to anything. Charlie, I called over the comm. What are you doing out here? No response. We approached cautiously, both of us remembering all too clearly what had happened with Nick. When we got within 10 meters, I could see Charlie's posture, rigid, head tilted slightly upward, arms loose at their sides. Charlie, this is Commander McLean. Acknowledge. Charlie turned slowly. Through their helmet visor, I could see their eyes, wide, unfocused, with that same distant expression Nick had worn. My brother is calling me, Charlie said, their voice dreamlike and soft. McLean and I exchanged glances through our visors. Charlie had no brother. Their personnel file listed no siblings, and in the months we'd worked together, they'd never mentioned any family besides a cousin on Mars. Charlie, you don't have a brother, I said carefully, inching closer. Let's head back to the base, okay? Charlie shook their head with a small smile. He's waiting for me, out there. Can't you hear the singing? I reached forward and grabbed Charlie's arm, trying to guide them back toward the base. With surprising strength, they yanked free of my grip, almost making me fall backward in the low gravity. Don't you hear it? Charlie asked, their voice rising with excitement. The beautiful singing? I looked past Charlie's shoulder and stopped. The green light had gotten way bigger since I'd last seen it. Now it flashed in a steady pattern, sending streaks of green light across the stars. Charlie's gloved hands moved to their helmet. Charlie, no! I lunged forward, but the distance between us was too great. Charlie quickly popped the lock and pulled the helmet off his head. In the emptiness of space, the air from his suit rushed out in a cloud of freezing moisture. His eyes bulged, his face twisted in pain, but only for a moment. Before the pressure loss could fully take him, Charlie kicked off from the surface with both feet, pushing himself toward the green light ahead. No! I screamed, firing my maneuvering thrusters and reaching out uselessly. McLean grabbed my arm, holding me in place. "Harris, stand down. There's nothing we can do." We watched in horror as Charlie's body drifted toward the throbbing green mass. Unlike Nick's slow drift, the green light seemed to reach out, shooting out something like an arm that wrapped around Charlie's body. For one terrible moment, Charlie's body was lit up with bright green light. Then came a flash, brighter than before, that forced me to look away. When I looked back, Charlie was gone. Not floating away, not drifting lifelessly in space. Completely gone, as if they had never existed. McLean's voice came through my comm, tense and controlled. "Back to base. Now." We went back in silence, following our own footprints back to Charlie's abandoned vehicle and then to the airlock. Every few steps, I fought the urge to look back at the green light, to see if it had grown even larger, if it was following us. Inside the airlock, the air pressure cycle seemed to take forever. When we finally removed our helmets, McLean's face was pale, his usual calm look replaced by obvious fear. "We need to contact Mission Control," he said. "Whatever that thing is, it's picking us off one by one." Dr. Klein was waiting when we entered the command center. One look at our faces told him everything. "Charlie?" he asked quietly. McLean shook his head. "Gone, same as Nick." Klein sank into a chair. "It's happening faster than I thought. The energy readings are crazy now." I walked to the main window and looked out at the stars. The green light was easy to see, even from here without any equipment. It hung in space like it was watching our little outpost, waiting. 2 crew members in 24 hours, McLean said, his voice hollow. "Whatever this thing is, it's not just some space phenomenon. It's targeting us specifically." Klein nodded, pulling up data on his tablet. "I've been looking at patterns in the radiation it gives off. There's intelligence behind it. A structure that's too complex to be random." "Charlie said they heard singing," I added, still staring at the light. "That their brother was calling them. But Charlie doesn't have a brother." "It's creating personalized lures," Klein said, his clinical tone failing to mask his own fear. "Somehow accessing memories or desires from our minds." McLean straightened his shoulders, visibly pulling himself back into command mode. "We're evacuating. Now, Klein, start transferring your research to portable drives. Harris, begin prep on the emergency shuttle. I want us ready to launch in 12 hours. I nodded, grateful for direct orders to follow. As I turned to leave for the shuttle bay, a sharp pain lanced through my head, brief but intense enough to make me wince. "You okay?" McLean asked, noticing my reaction. "Just a headache," I said, rubbing my temple. The pain was already fading, but it left behind an odd sensation, like an echo of a voice just beyond the range of hearing. As I went to get ready for our escape, I couldn't shake the feeling that our chances of actually getting away were getting worse by the hour. I stared at the screen on my tablet, trying to focus on evacuation protocols while my head throbbed. The pain had come and gone several times since returning from our failed attempt to rescue Charlie. Each episode lasted only seconds, but left behind a strange feeling, like words just beyond my ability to hear them. The comm panel on my desk chimed with an incoming message. Dr. Klein's voice came through, oddly tense. "Harris, meet us in the research lab immediately. McLean is already on his way." I didn't bother responding, just set down my tablet and left. The corridors of Outpost KP-27 felt different now. Emptier, knowing our crew of 5 was down to 3 in just over a day. The overhead lights blinked briefly as I passed the junction to the eastern wing, making me walk faster. When I reached the research lab, Commander McLean was already there, leaning against one of the workstations with his arms crossed. He looked older than his 52 years, with deeper lines in his face since Charlie disappeared. Dr. Klein stood at his main console, pulling up files and images with quick, nervous movements of his fingers. "What's this about, Klein?" McLean asked as I entered. We should be prepping for evacuation, not holding meetings. Klein didn't look up from his screen. I've been holding back information that ends now. McLean sat up straight. Excuse me? Those signals we've been receiving. I've completed the analysis. Klein finally turned to face us, his gaunt face pale under the lab lights. They're not messages, they're warnings. Warnings? I moved closer to see the screen. From who? Klein pulled up a complex waveform display that showed patterns of energy changes. I think they're from another species, maybe the last survivors of whatever star system that thing came from before it got to us. That thing has a name now? McLean asked. I've been calling it the Green Maw, Klein replied, typing rapidly to bring up new data. And it's not radiation or any kind of natural phenomenon. It's an entity, intelligent and hunting. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Ever since I'd watched Nick vanish, I'd felt there was something deliberate behind that green light. Hearing Klein confirm it sent a chill through me. You knew this, McLean said, his voice dangerously quiet. You knew, and you kept it to yourself while 2 of my crew were taken. Klein's shoulders hunched a bit. I wasn't sure until after what happened to Charlie. The patterns were too complex, too specific to be random. He pulled up a new screen showing 2 waveforms side by side. Look at this. These are the signals from the entity compared to human brainwave patterns. I leaned in closer. Even though I didn't know much about this stuff, I could see they looked really similar. The patterns matched up in several spots. It's using our own minds against us, Klein continued, creating a direct interface with human consciousness. That's why Nick heard it calling. Why Charlie believed their non-existent brother was out there. It reads our thoughts? McLean asked. More like it exploits memories and fears, Klein corrected, creating personalized lures based on what it finds. Nick was always fascinated by the unknown. It used that curiosity. Charlie had unresolved grief about family. The entity shaped itself accordingly. I rubbed my temple as another brief stab of pain shot through my head. It's basically a deep-sea predator, I said, like those fish that use lights to catch prey. Klein nodded. That's a good way to put it. But instead of a light, it uses our own minds to create the perfect bait. McLean pushed away from the workstation and walked around the lab. Why didn't we all hear it then? Why just Nick and Charlie? Different susceptibilities, perhaps, Klein suggested. Or it might be growing stronger, more capable of influence with each feeding. The word feeding hung in the air between us, making what happened to our crewmates even more horrifying. McLean stopped pacing and faced us, his mind made up. We're leaving. Now. No more observation, no more waiting. 12 hours to prep the emergency shuttle and grab whatever research data we can salvage. Agreed, Klein said, already moving to connect a portable drive to his workstation. I'll need to transfer my research and the warning signals. If we can decode them fully, they might contain crucial information about the entity's weaknesses. Harris, McLean turned to me, start gathering essential supplies and running pre-flight checks on the shuttle. I want us ready to launch the minute Klein's data transfer is complete. Yes, sir. I headed for the door, my mind racing through mental checklists of what we'd need. As I reached the doorway, the overhead lights blinked out again, this time for longer, making the hallway go dark before coming back on. I stopped and looked back at Klein. That's the 3rd time the lights have done that in the last hour, I said. Klein glanced up at the ceiling with a worried expression. Check the system status on your way to the shuttle bay. I paused at a nearby terminal and pulled up the base's operational readouts. What I saw made my stomach drop. We've got unexplained power drops throughout the station, I reported. Life support is stable, but we're seeing efficiency reductions in almost every system. Communications, environmental controls, even the water recycling units. Klein stopped his data transfer and came over to my terminal. It's already started, he said quietly, typing quickly to pull up more detailed information. "What started?" McLean asked, coming to stand beside us. "The entity's influence extending beyond organic minds to our technology," Klein explained. "These power fluctuations aren't random failures. They're systematic. It's attempting to trap us here before we can escape." I looked up from the terminal, my eyes automatically going to the small viewport built into the lab's outer wall. The view took me by surprise. The green light had changed since I'd last seen it. No longer far away, it now covered a big part of the sky outside, with edges that moved and pulsed. Streams of green light spread across the stars, stretching toward our asteroid base. "It's getting closer," I said unnecessarily, unable to look away. McLean looked out the window for a bit, looking determined. "We now have 6 hours, not 12. Klein, take only what's absolutely essential. Harris, I want that shuttle ready to fly in 4 hours. We're not giving that thing any more time to cut off our escape." I nodded and hurried out of the lab, trying not to look back at the window again. As I walked through the hallways toward the shuttle bay, the lights kept blinking on and off, making weird shadows move on the walls. The pain in my head came back suddenly, worse than before. This time I could almost make out words in the pain, like a whisper I could barely understand. I pushed my hands against my head, trying to block it out. Whatever the green maw was saying, I didn't want to hear it. I'd seen what happened to those who listened. I slammed the emergency barrier controls for Section 3, watching the heavy metal doors grind shut across the maintenance corridor. That made 5 sections secured in the last 30 minutes, each one requiring manual override as the base's automatic systems continued to degrade. My hands shook as I logged the completion in my tablet, crossing another item off our evacuation checklist. The overhead lights dimmed, brightened, then dimmed again, a pattern that had become more frequent in the past hour. The base's systems were failing all around us, affected by whatever the green maw was doing to them. I didn't understand how an entity could interfere with technology this way, but the evidence was impossible to ignore. "Harris, status report." Commander McLean's voice crackled over my comm unit, the usual clarity of our internal communications now marred by static. "Sections 1 through 5 secured, sir," I replied, already moving toward the next junction. "Heading to secure the laboratory wing now. How's our power situation?" "Life support holding at 48% capacity. Backup generators engaged, but showing strain." McLean's voice sounded measured and focused, the voice of a career commander who had handled crises before. It reassured me, despite everything. "Klein reports data transfer at 70%. We need at least 90 before we can risk departure." "Understood. I'll check in with him after I finish with the lab section." The corridors felt creepy as I walked through them, with red emergency lights making everything look strange. This outpost had been home for 8 months. Now the whole place was making scary noises and breaking down while we tried to get out. At the laboratory wing, I found Dr. Klein hunched over his workstation, multiple drives connected to the main system. His fingers moved frantically across the keyboard, eyes darting between screens. "How's it coming?" I asked, moving to the emergency barrier controls on the far wall. Klein didn't look up. 73% now. The entity is interfering with data throughput. I've had to create redundant transfer protocols to compensate." He gestured toward a small pile of portable drives. "Those are complete backups. Grab them if I don't make it to the shuttle." I paused at his words, suddenly struck by how real our situation was. We weren't just executing an emergency protocol. We were fighting for our lives. "Everyone's making it to the shuttle," I said firmly, activating the barrier sequence. The laboratory doors began to close, sealing off essential equipment and samples we'd have to leave behind. "The commander's keeping life support prioritized to our evacuation route. We've got time." Klein finally looked up, his gaunt face pale under the red emergency lights. "That thing took Nick and Charlie in less than 30 hours, Harris. We're not dealing with a natural disaster or equipment failure. We're being hunted." Before I could respond, the comm unit crackled with static. McLean's voice came through, but something in his tone made me stop cold. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors," he said, his words coming slightly slower than normal. "Some kind of signature. I need to check this personally." Klein and I exchanged alarmed glances. The hesitation in McLean's voice was completely unlike him. "Commander, what kind of signature?" I asked, already moving toward the door. "We should stick to the evacuation plan." There was a long pause before McLean responded. "It looks like... No, that can't be right." His voice had grown distant, almost dreamy. "I need to verify this. Stay on task. I'll join you at the shuttle bay." Klein grabbed my arm. "Something's wrong. The entity must be affecting him." I nodded, feeling worried. "Finish your data transfer. I'm going to the command center." "Not alone," Klein insisted, disconnecting one of his drives. "The transfer will continue automatically. We need to stay together now." We hurried through the corridors, the base groaning around us as more systems failed. The lights kept blinking continuously now, plunging us into darkness for seconds at a time before the emergency backups kicked in. Twice we had to manually override doors that had frozen in partially open positions. As we approached the command center, I noticed the temperature had dropped significantly. Our breath created small clouds in the air, a sign that environmental controls were failing in this section. The observation viewport at the end of the corridor showed an intense green light that leaked around the edges of its protective shutter, a shutter that should have been fully closed during an emergency. The command center door was sealed, the access panel beside it dark. "Dead?" Klein asked as I tried the manual override. "No. Locked from the inside." I tapped my comm unit. "Commander McLean, we're outside the command center. Please respond." The only reply was a burst of static. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear anything from inside. There was a faint murmuring sound, like someone talking to themselves. "We need to get in there," I said, moving to the emergency access panel hidden behind a section of wall paneling. "He's not responding, and this goes against all evacuation protocols." Klein helped me pull away the panel, revealing the manual door release. It took both of us pulling on the heavy lever to disengage the locking mechanism. The door slid open a few inches before stopping. We forced our fingers into the gap and pulled, gradually widening the opening enough to squeeze through. The command center was bathed in green light. All the protective shutters on the viewports had been retracted, allowing the sickly luminescence from outside to flood the room. The temperature here was even colder, cold enough that ice crystals had formed on the metal surfaces of the control panels. Commander McLean stood before the main viewport, his back to us, completely motionless. The green light played across his uniform, giving him an otherworldly appearance. He didn't react to our entrance. "Commander?" I called softly, taking a careful step toward him. He turned slowly, and I felt awful when I saw his face. His eyes were wide and unfocused, with huge pupils that made the blue color almost disappear. The green light bounced off them, making them shine weirdly. He had this look of wonder and longing, exactly the same look I'd seen on Nick's face before he disappeared. "My daughter," McLean whispered, his gaze moving back to the viewport. "Emily is out there." I took another step closer, trying to keep my movements slow and non-threatening. "Sir, Emily isn't here. She passed away. Remember? 3 years ago, on Earth." McLean smiled. "No, she's right there. She's calling me." He raised his hand toward the viewport, pointing to something outside. "She needs her father." Through the viewport, I could see the green maw had completely surrounded our asteroid base. What had started as a distant speck just days ago now filled the sky. The green maw had wrapped around our outpost. Pulses of brighter green moved through it in a rhythm. "Commander McLean," Klein said, his voice firm but calm. "What you're seeing isn't real. The entity is accessing your memories, using them to lure you out, just like it did with Charlie and Nick." McLean shook his head slightly, still smiling. "You're wrong, Doctor. I can see her clearly. My little girl needs me." He started moving toward the emergency airlock's control panel. I grabbed his arm. "Sir, you need to focus. We have to get to the shuttle. Whatever you're seeing, it's not real." The change in McLean was instant and scary. His face twisted in anger, and with strength that seemed impossible for a man his age, he shoved me backward. I slammed into the nearest control panel, getting the wind knocked out of me. "Don't try to stop me," he growled, the voice barely recognizable as the commander I'd served under for months. "She's alone out there." Klein moved to block his path to the airlock controls. "Think, Commander. Emily died on Earth. You showed us her picture. You told us about the accident. This isn't her. It's using your grief against you." For a moment, doubt crossed McLean's face. He seemed to snap out of it a little as he looked at Klein with a hint of recognition. "Doctor, I don't understand." "Fight it," I urged, pushing myself up from the console. "We need you, Commander. We need to evacuate now." The moment of clarity disappeared as fast as it had shown up. McLean's eyes quickly looked back at the viewport, getting wider again. "She's crying," he whispered. "I have to go to her." What happened next occurred so rapidly I barely had time to react. McLean lunged forward, shoving Klein aside with the same unnatural strength he'd used on me. Klein stumbled and fell, hitting his head on the edge of a workstation. By the time I reached the airlock controls, McLean had already activated the emergency override sequence. "Commander, stop!" I shouted, trying to cancel the sequence. "You'll die out there." McLean turned to look at me one last time, his eyes completely filled with the green glow. "She needs me," he said simply. The inner airlock door opened and McLean went inside. I jumped for the control panel, trying desperately to stop the cycle, but McLean had turned on the emergency protocols. The moment he closed the inner door, the outer door would open automatically, skipping the pressurization sequence. "McLean, there's no suit! You'll die instantly!" I pounded on the airlock window, trying to get through to him. He smiled at me through the reinforced glass, calm and peaceful. "It's okay, Harris. I'm going to see Emily." He reached for the inner door control. Klein appeared beside me with a cut on his forehead. "Michael, we can't stop him." The inner door closed with a hiss. Through the small window in the airlock, I watched as McLean turned away from us and faced the outer door. He looked relaxed, like he was getting ready to meet someone. When the outer door opened, the pressure sucked him out into space, and he started drifting away from the base. For a terrible moment, I could see his face. He looked peaceful, smiling, reaching toward the pulsing green mass waiting beyond. The cold and lack of air should have killed him right away, but somehow he stayed conscious, moving on purpose as he floated toward the green maw. A strip of light came out from the main mass, moving toward McLean. It wrapped around him in a cocoon of light that got super bright for a few seconds. When the light went away, McLean was gone. Not dead and floating, but completely vanished, just like Nick and Charlie before him. An alarm went off in the command center. Red warning lights flashed as a computer voice said, "Critical system failure imminent. Life support compromised. Evacuation recommended." Klein grabbed my shoulder. "There's nothing we can do for him. We need to move. Now." I looked away from the window and nodded. "How much of your data did you get?" "Enough to make it worth something," Klein said, collecting a tablet from a nearby workstation. 87%. It will have to do." The base shuddered around us, metal groaning as environmental systems began catastrophic failure sequences. The temperature was dropping rapidly now, and several console screens went dark as power redirected to critical systems. "We've got minutes, not hours," I said, leading the way toward the exit. "The shuttle bay is on the opposite side of the base." We ran through corridors that were now barely lit, the emergency lighting failing in sections and plunging us into near-total darkness. The cold grew more intense with each section we passed through, our breath clouding heavily in front of us. Twice we had to climb through partially closed barrier doors, forcing them open just enough to squeeze through. Another violent shudder ran through the base, throwing us against the wall. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the distinctive sound of a hull breach alarm. "We're losing structural integrity," Klein gasped, clutching his tablet to his chest as we pushed forward. "The entity must be applying physical pressure to the base." I didn't answer, focusing on making my way through the more and more dangerous path to the shuttle bay. In my mind, I kept seeing McLean's peaceful face as he drifted into space. Nothing like the fear I would have expected. Whatever the green maw showed him must have been strong enough to overcome even basic survival instincts. This thought made me shiver, and it wasn't because of the failing environmental systems. If it could make an experienced commander like McLean walk willingly into space, what else might it do? The headaches I'd been having came to mind, and I wondered if I was already affected in some way I couldn't tell. The final stretch to the shuttle bay was a nightmare of blinking lights and freezing air. Klein and I half ran, half limped through corridors where frost now coated the walls. Each heavy breath made thick clouds in front of our faces as the environmental systems kept breaking down. "Almost there," I gasped as we rounded the last corner. The shuttle bay doors stood partially open, jammed in position by the power fluctuations that plagued the entire base. We squeezed through the gap into the huge launch area. Our emergency shuttle waited on its launch pad with its systems already running. I'd started the pre-flight sequence earlier, which saved us valuable time now. "Get in and secure yourself," I told Klein, helping him through the shuttle's narrow hatch. "I need to override the bay doors manually." Klein held his tablet and the portable drives with his data. "Make it fast, Harris. We have minutes at most." I ran to the emergency panel near the big bay doors and pulled down the manual release lever. The hydraulics made a loud noise as the doors slowly opened, showing the stars outside, and the green mass that now covered almost half the space around our asteroid base. A big shake hit the whole structure, throwing me against the wall. Metal made an awful noise somewhere deep in the base as structural beams broke under pressure. I pushed away from the wall and ran back to the shuttle, jumping through the hatch as another, stronger shake hit the bay. "Strap in," I ordered, sliding into the pilot's seat and securing my harness. My fingers flew across the control panels, completing the launch sequence. "This is going to be rough." Klein buckled himself into the co-pilot's seat, his face ghostly pale in the glow of the instrument panels. "The entity is crushing the base," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. "Look at the external pressure readings." The diagnostic display showed high pressure on the outpost's outer hull, way more than what space would normally cause. Something was pressing on the structure from the outside. I engaged the main thrusters, feeling the shuttle vibrate as power built in its engines. "Hold on." We lifted off from the pad just as the bay ceiling began to buckle, metal panels raining down where we'd been moments before. I pushed the throttle to maximum and the shuttle shot forward through the bay doors into open space. Behind us, the base caved in. Through the rear camera, I watched our home of 8 months break apart. The green lights wrapped around the structure, crushing it until nothing was left but broken metal pieces. "Maximum burn," I muttered, more to myself than Klein, pushing the engines well beyond recommended limits. The shuttle shuddered under the strain as we accelerated away from the asteroid and the glowing entity that had consumed our crew. For several minutes, we didn't speak. The rattling engines and constant warning beeps from the control panel were the only sounds in the cabin. I kept watching the navigation displays as I worked out our path away from KP-27 and toward the inner solar system. Behind us, the green light was still visible, getting only a little dimmer as we got farther away. "It's following us," Klein said finally, his eyes fixed on the monitoring screen. "Slowly, but definitely in pursuit." I looked at his display. The energy readings showed a distinct pattern trailing our path. How is that possible? We're moving at near maximum speed. Klein changed the sensors for better resolution. "It doesn't move like any life form we understand," he said. "It exists partially in dimensions we can't properly see. What we see as light and energy is just the part that crosses into our reality." My head hurt with a dull ache, but it felt different now. Less invasive, more like the aftermath of intense stress rather than the strange, probing feeling I'd felt on the base. "I think it's having trouble reaching us mentally at this distance," I said, rubbing my temple. "The headaches are different." "That matches my theory," Klein nodded, his fingers tapping across his tablet as he connected it to the shuttle's main computer. "It's not just hunting us, Harris. It's an evolutionary apex predator that feeds on intelligent consciousness." "Feed? Like literally consuming Nick and the others?" Klein looked up from his tablet with a grim face. "Not their bodies, their minds, their awareness, their very sense of self. If my analysis is right, this thing has been around for thousands of years, moving between star systems after using up all the prey it could find." The implications hit me hard. "Those warnings we picked up came from its previous hunting ground," Klein confirmed. "Likely the last transmission from whatever intelligence inhabited that system before they were consumed. But why didn't it just take all of us at once? Why the elaborate lures?" "Fear," Klein said simply. "Terror, panic, confusion. They flavor the consciousness, make it more nutritious, for lack of a better term. It's similar to how adrenaline affects meat quality in animals." He paused, seemingly aware of how clinical he sounded. "I'm sorry, that was callous. Nick and Charlie were my colleagues too." I waved away his apology. "Keep going. We need to understand what we're dealing with." Klein showed us some complicated waveform patterns on his tablet. "From what I've figured out from the warning signals, this thing doesn't just eat mind and consciousness. It takes memory, knowledge, even personality. Each time it feeds, it gets better at tricking the next victim." That's why it knew about McLean's daughter, I realized, and why Charlie thought they heard a brother calling them. Precisely. It tailors its approach to each victim using what it's learned from previous captures. The longer it hunts a population, the more effective it becomes. The shuttle's sensors made a soft alert sound. I checked the readings and felt sick to my stomach. Energy patterns moving behind us. It's speeding up. Klein moved forward to look at the display. "We should have expected this. It's changing how it's chasing us." I pushed our engines harder, knowing we were already pushing them too much. The whole shuttle shook more, with the metal making noise like it was complaining. "We need to warn Earth," I said, looking at the communications array. "The inner system colonies, the Martian bases, everyone needs to know what's coming." Klein's face got more serious. "It might follow any message we send," he warned, stopping me as I was about to use the comm controls. "Think about it, Harris. This thing connects straight to technology. It shut down our base systems. What's stopping it from using our communication networks to spread?" I took my hand away as I realized he made sense. "So we're just supposed to run? Hope we reach human outposts before it catches us?" "For now, yes," Klein nodded. "We need more distance, more time to analyze the data I gathered. There might be weaknesses, patterns we can exploit." I turned back to the navigation console and plotted a course toward the inner solar system, toward Earth, still months away at our current speed. The empty space between us and home had never felt so threatening. A sudden spike of pain shot through my head, way worse than the dull ache from before. I gasped, my vision going blurry for a moment. Klein's voice seemed to come from very far away, asking if I was all right. The pain went away as quickly as it had come, but something stayed. An impression, a vision burned into my mind. I saw the true form of the maw, very old and huge, its countless eyes fixed on our tiny shuttle. The thing existed in layers, dimensions folded upon dimensions, with only a small part visible to humans. It was bigger than stars, older than solar systems, and completely hungry. The vision only lasted seconds, but I knew for sure it would never stop hunting us or anyone we contacted. Harris? Michael? Klein was shaking my shoulder, genuine concern on his usually impassive face. I blinked, coming back to the present moment. I saw it, I whispered, my voice hoarse. Not just the light we've been seeing, but what it actually is. It let me see. A final attempt at influence as we reached the edge of its immediate range, Klein theorized, studying my face carefully. What did you see? I tried to find words to describe the weird thing I'd seen, but couldn't. Something old, I finally said. Older than anything we've ever found. And patient. It doesn't care how long the hunt takes. Klein nodded slowly. The warnings had bits suggesting it's chased other species across entire galaxies. Time means nothing to it. We went quiet, each stuck in our own thoughts as the shuttle kept flying toward the inner system. The green light behind us was now just a tiny dot, but the sensor readings showed the truth. It was still following, adapting, learning. I locked our course and switched to autopilot, taking a moment to really think about what had happened over the past 48 hours. Our entire crew, Nick, Charlie, Commander McLean, gone, eaten by something we barely understood. Our base destroyed. And now Klein and I were running through space toward Earth, maybe bringing this hunter straight to humanity's home. The shuttle's engines buzzed steadily around us, pushing us forward at speeds that once would have amazed me. Now they felt way too slow compared to what was chasing us. I looked at the stars through the window, each one a possible safe place that seemed more and more out of reach. Klein went back to his tablet, looking through the data he'd saved from the base. I knew he was searching for anything that might help us, any weakness we could use. But I was sure from my vision. The Green Maw had hunted across huge distances and eaten civilizations much more advanced than ours. What chance did we have? I checked our path one more time, making small changes to save fuel. We were headed for Earth, though getting there would take months. Behind us, the thing followed, never stopping its chase, drawn by the minds it had tasted in my crewmates, and now wanted to eat throughout human space.